So today we're talking about breaking your goals down into categories, right? So last week we spoke about broad scope goals. So what do you want to achieve in a year's time? The caveat was, I said to you that most people who do that and don't break their goals down in the categories will not achieve anything. Because what happens is they'll write them down in January and quit by March. Here's the thing. The other thing I said was you should be writing your goals down in October for the year to come. That gives you 3 months to think about it and digest it. You need that time, and here's why. So today we're going to break things down in the categories. This is the formula, and this is the action and the activity and the execution that gets you to the end of the year achieving at least 75% of your goals. All right? So what we do is we plan, we vet the goals to make sure that they're on point, we break them into iterations, we write the strategy, and then we execute. Today we're talking about this thing. We're talking about execution, okay? So what I'm going to use as a sample is I'm going to use a founder who in 2024 turned over $250,000 in sales. Now, that founder wants to get to 500. So he wants to 2x his sales revenue. Whew, that's a big ask, right? Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it possible without doing this? Absolutely not. If the strategy was to 2x revenue to $500,000 without a strategy, without thinking and planning and executing well, he'll fail. Let's give this guy a name. Let's call him Tommy. This is Tommy. All right. Tommy's a startup founder. He's got a great little business. He's selling products online. Let's just go with that avatar. And he's trying to figure out, look, 2024 was great, but when I had a job in sales, I was earning that money. So he's built some collateral, and now he's thinking about, okay, if I can 2x it, in 24 months, he's doubled his income from the previous job he had as an FTE. Okay, so this is a big ask. So what I'm doing is we're gonna bypass this, but don't forget, vet your ideas, make sure that they're valid and they're realistic. You can't, if Tommy was saying, I wanna get to $3 million from 250,000 and it's his second year in business, well, he's gonna fail. 100%. He will fail. Why? He hasn't gained enough educational collateral or knowledge or IP. He's built a business that doesn't have anything that's got leverage or sustainability right now. So you got to be in this planning phase, in this vetting phase, you have to be realistic about the goal. Now, I know I'm only talking about one goal today, and the avatar is a business owner. But if you're looking to get a job, if you're looking to improve your health and all those sorts of things, you still have to do this. Without that, the goal is unattainable. Without that, the goal is unattainable. Executable goals across a period, all right? So the time horizon is 12 months. So we're gonna start, the first thing you do is you date them, right? We're gonna start on the 1st, and then we've got to, say, Christmas, to achieve everything that we're about to write down today. Okay, let me dive into it. So moving from 250 is the goal, right? So the target is, how do I increase my revenue by $250,000? I need to do twice as much. Now, can one founder do twice as much? If they apply a good strategy and they execute well, they probably can. In fact, you could probably do a lot more than that. So I'm gonna talk about doing things sequentially or in order, right? So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna break this down in categories. So let's say we're gonna break this down into months. I'll do this, all right? I'm not gonna do the full 12 months. I'll just do 6 of them, all right? That'll be enough to contextualize what you would do across a 12-month period. So this is January, this is February, this is March, April, May, June. All right, so I've figured out in my planning and my vetting that this is achievable, all right? Now what I need to do is break it down into iterations so we can execute. All right? By the way, you're doing this in October, you're not doing this in January. It'll take you 30 days to get this right. So spend the 30 days to deep dive. You do your first plan, your first strategy, and then you vet it. Like I said on the other episode, vet it with people who are in the market who have done this before you. My advice is never go to someone who hasn't done that. If you went to someone who went from 250 to 3 million, it's a perfect person to help you. But if you're speaking to an FTE who earns $150,000 a year, do not get advice from that person, because if they haven't done it before more than once, that's my benchmark, more than once, they have to have at least done it twice in 2 businesses, you're getting the advice from the wrong person. So stick with the theory that you are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most. Vet this with those great 5 people. Right, so let's dive into it. January, 250. So if I was to think about being cyclical and rolling things out in order, what would be the first thing you would do to increase revenue? You have to increase sales. Critically important. So to increase sales, what else would you have to do? Increase leads. So I'm going to break those down into 2 master categories, right? 2 master categories. So these are big things, right? So the other thing is what? Staff. I'm working on my own. I've come to the plan through my planning phase and vetting that with other people, is that for me to 2x my revenue, I can't do it on my own. I need staff. To get staff, I need to increase this number. Make sense? So what I'm saying is, if you're going to execute against something like this, you need to think about it. So I've identified 3 things in my planning and vetting stage that I need to have to execute against that number. So out of those 3, you have to make a decision where you're going to start and where you would drop it in, right? You could consider these months as iterations, right? Categories, boxes, stages, whatever you want to call them, doesn't matter. I call them iterations. I'm a big fan of that. That's what a SaaS platform or a startup tech company would call them in their development phase. So what would come first? You got to think about the horse before the cart, right? Because if you do it in the wrong order, the execution will fail because they're the wrong way around. And by the way, when you work in iterations in the cycle, right, in the strategy, what happens is it forces you to do the cycle in the right order. Sorry to drop in on the video, just 10 seconds. What we're trying to do is get to 1 million subs this year, 1 million subs. We're at almost 250,000. The YouTube fire-breathing unicorns want us to get to 1 million, so we'd really appreciate your support. We've got lots of things to give away this year. We've got some great interviews coming, and your support will help us achieve all of that sort of stuff. So I want to say thank you, appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button, and let's get back to the video. So you can't do February and March unless you execute in January correctly, all right? So if there's a strategy here that's required for this to be successful, you want to give yourself a little bit of a buffer. So if you don't get it, nail it in January in 30 days, you can still get it in February to execute against the next stage of that iteration of March. All right, so now we're at the stage where we're thinking about what we're going to achieve across time horizon of 12 months. I know I'm breaking it down to 6. What comes first? So if I want to increase sales, I'm going to need leads. So that has to come first, right? So we're going to say in January, I'm going to increase budget for marketing. That's one thing I'm going to do. What else could I do in terms of increasing this collateral out, right? I need to give those leads to someone. I'm currently doing $250,000 worth of sales myself. I can't do 500. I need to start recruiting. So I need to start running ads. And I need to recruit. So I need to build the ads and I need to recruit. So you break it down into another category. So now we're moving down into different categories using iterations. So the next step is, okay, if I'm to increase my budget, how much is that going to be? So I run my numbers and I say, I think I can increase my budget by 10%. I can get away with that. Okay, if I'm gonna run an ad, what I need to do is I need to put together an avatar. Like, what am I looking for? What type of person am I looking for? I'm gonna break it down into another iteration. Now you can move into iterations in any type of vertical as detailed as you want. So if I'm going to look at an avatar, I need to build a position description, all right? If I'm going to build a position description, I need to figure out what the salary will be and when I can recruit them. And that is just one element, broken down into 1, 2, 3 iterations. So let's start with, let's carry on with that, right? So what I'm going to do to get my team member, increasing the leads is easy, right? You just increase the budget. So let's say that we've ticked that off in January, it's done. We did it on the 15th. More leads are starting to come through. It's putting a bit of pressure on me. I can't call all the leads. We're going to launch the ad for a new team member in January. We've created the PD. And what I need to do now is in February, we need to appoint, I'll put it here. We need to appoint a team member, which is a sales team member. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 things to get that dropped into February. So I'm going to allow 30 days for this person to get up and running. And in March, in the next iteration, is sales are going to increase by 10%. So I've done all of this first. This has come second in February. And in March, I've executed, and I'm looking to make 10% return on my investment. So now I'm moving forward. So that's another $25,000 on my long-term forecast, right? Now I need to build that out across the year. So we may do this again. In March, I'm going to start to recruit another sales agent. And then we're going to duplicate that and do that again. So in May, you're increasing sales by 20%. And you build that out across the year. I'll just quickly go through it one more time. It's pretty simple stuff. You guys will probably get this. So we're planning in October for 3 months. We're vetting. We're breaking it down into iterations. We're writing our strategy and we're executing. January is your execution month. In that month, you've determined that increasing lead count is easy. I can get that done in January. So I've built more ads, I've launched them in Meta, and they're starting to fire. They take 2 weeks to propagate. Leads are starting to come through. Simultaneously, what I'm doing is I'm recruiting. So I've written the ad, a position description. I've tried to determine how much money I can put towards a salary for an FTE. And then I'm appointing that person to start in February. Marketing collateral has started to kick in. I have enough leads for this person as we determined that was our core goal in January. And now they've increased revenue by 10% in March because I've allowed 30 days for that to happen. And then I duplicate that. Now it's 20%. And then I duplicate it. And now down here it's 30%. So it's one key core strategy on how to go from here to here, applying principles to earn and 2x your income. Now there's all these other things that can happen in the middle of that, right? So the next thing was, I want to increase sales. So this is one element in your strategy that will influence that number. Now you might get to the end of the year and that may have increased by 150,000, but it's not going to get you to your target goal, right? So in your strategy, when you vet it, you come up and you iterate and break it down into sections. And in your strategy, you've realized that this alone will not get you to that goal. So you come to a realization that I need another strategy to execute against, all right? So now I have to think about, okay, now what am I gonna do? In your planning stage, you'll realize that really quickly when you write it on paper. You have to write all of this down on paper. My advice is put it in a Word document or a spreadsheet to start with. And what happens is when you apply numbers to the goal setting process, you'll end up with an annual number. And if it's below that number, you have to go back into planning stage. Simple, right? Logical. Most people don't actually do that. What they do is they just start doing things without vetting it very well. And then they ask themselves, why is this not working? It's because they haven't thought long enough over that long time horizon. Because if they had, they'd come to the realization that if I keep doing this and only this, that is unattainable. I have to increase sales. I made a determination that I only get to 350,000, let's say 400,000, I need to make up another 100,000 in sales. How do I do that? Because you're not going to get lift out of the agent let's say the agent's operating, the salesperson's operating at peak performance and you're getting a 10% conversion rate. You can't squeeze any more out of that. Going harder in that space will only break things. So you need to diversify. So strategy, diversification, strategy, diversification. So I've got, okay, sales. So what I might do is partnerships, more products, Google advertising, affiliates. There's all these things that you can do. Figure out what's best for your product and for your business and what you're closest to. Like if you know some influencers or some affiliate partners that you think you could partner with, great, you should do that. So if you know somebody, it's the easiest thing to do, right? Because you can move really fast with it. And if you trust that person and they are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with the most, that's even better, right? But you might need to go find those people. So what if I said, okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna partner. So I'm gonna draw another line along here and I'm gonna roll out another strategy to execute against. And I'm gonna go, in January, I'm gonna go partnerships. And I need those partnerships, just for the sake of this video, to bring in $100,000. So you build all of this again in alignment with that. To diversify my strategy to increase revenue, I want to look at partnerships, and I need to get it to a capacity of $100,000 across the time horizon of 12 months. So I go back to this model. Plan it, vet it, iterate it, strategy, execute. Okay, so I'm going to say, now I'm going to just go through the same process, right? So partners, what do I do to find partners? So in January, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my research. I'll look at what types of partners there are in the market, who do I know, who's buying the product, who's in my local area, who's in my local group, who's in my network community, and identify a list of 12 partners. And then in January, I'm also going to write a presentation, because I know I'm going to need a presentation to present to the partner, and then I'm going to need a contract. Then I'm going to need a payment schedule. Then I'm going to need a payment system. See how all these things layer on top of each other. What most people do is go, I'm going to get partners to make $100,000. Great. How are you going to do that? No idea. Absolutely no idea. And then they start doing it and it becomes really hard because they're running out of time. That's why you plan here, execute here. Otherwise, so now my execution inside my strategy is to contact them. So I'm going to contact 50 partners, potential partners. In March, we're going to launch the partnership. So if that's a 30-day period, you've actually got 60 days to execute against that, not 30. So you want to come in pretty hard in February and don't start on the 15th, start on the 1st, because it buys you a little bit more time to deploy that in March. So I'm contacting 50. My sales guy's really starting to get traction. And now my next strategy is I'm going to contact 50 partners. I'm going to land 1 or 2 of those partners and I'm going to launch them here. So somewhere before this launch, you have to consider contracts, legalities, terms, payments, invoicing, relationship, how all that's going to work. So that has to be planned back here. You can't plan it when you're ready to launch. It's going to take too long. And you need to conceptualize it and vet it back here. So it needs to be done over here before you launch it. It's the highest probability to success. Why? Because it's logical. If you run the math across it, it makes sense to make a determination that I need at least 60 days to do that. You can't do it all at the same time, it won't work, because you have to focus on that. And what happens with entrepreneurs and young founders is they're trying to do all of this, but they've missed the boat because they still need to focus on that. So if that was 50 hours a week to generate $250,000 and you're executing against this, which is taking about 30 hours a week, what happens? You probably get burnt out. Then your efficiency decreases. Stress increases, efficiency decreases, and then it's all over. So be considered, think about the plan, launch it appropriately. You can't deviate from that because this goal is reliant on that number. So this goal is reliant on your contribution to the number. This other 250 is going to hit increase lead count. That goes to an agent where you're going to increase sales by 10% by March. If I'm launching my diversification strategy to execute, I'm thinking about, okay, I need to launch in March. So I've got to get all the paperwork done here and all the admin here so I can focus on nurturing the relationship in this month. Because I need this guy to generate, let's say 3% revenue in April. And then in May, I need it to go to 5%. And then in June, I need to grow it to 6.5%. Right? So that could be one partner, that could be two partners. So what you're doing now is you're increasing sales by 20% every 60 days. You're diversified to create more revenue in another place that doesn't affect that place. So if this falls over, you've still got that. And then that's increasing by 3, 5, and 6, incrementally across a time horizon. It's how you get to that number. You don't just do what you were doing here and do more of it, it won't work. Scaling normally requires investment or acquisition. Growth requires strategy. This thing here, right? So I guess the lesson of the episode today is that when you start the goal setting process, plan it, vet the planning, go to people you know. You might get your accountant to run through the numbers. Break it down into iterations. These two are iterations. Partnering, sales agent is an iteration. Monthly is also an iteration. Write the strategy for these two segments. And then you have to execute against it. But when you execute against it, it has to be done here in iterations. You can't execute randomly all at once. Because as a sole founder and business owner, you are the core investment in the company. So you have to be very considered. But if you do this, you do small little proportions every month that don't affect your psychology to deliver that number and to run the company and grow the company overall. Now, part of the strategy for me would be, how do I bring in a co-founder? So if you're a young founder and you've built $250 million to $500,000 in revenue, the strategy should be is when you're growing sales here and you're going to 2x by increased sales, increased lead count, increased partnership slowly over time. Maybe your planning phase in June is to start looking for a co-founder. Don't be scared to give away equity. It's one of the biggest mistakes I ever made. I should have given away equity and I didn't do that because it was all on me, right? So I think founders should be pro-equity distribution because you get to that number faster. Because what happens is you share the load on that number. That gives you more time to add more diversification in your company. Because the problem with this business model, which is a startup business model, is that you can't increase the number too much because you're all waiting on one person to deliver that number. So that's got to come off the founder and it's got to be distributed into the business. Because the founder's normally the visionary, he's the guy that comes up with all the ideas, or the girl, and he's the one who thinks about, okay, where should the company be and why are we here in the first place? But he's going to get so much grey noise or white noise here because he's too focused on sales. So my advice is, for young founders, is to do that. And then at some stage, in year 3 is normally a good place to do it. Year 2 is also okay. If you don't have a co-founder at the start, find one a little bit later on in your business journey because that'll take all the pressure off you. Now, if you're going to hire a co-founder, you need to find someone that complements your skill set. Do not hire the same person. So Tommy here is a sales guy, right? He's good at sales. He's worked for a whole bunch of sales companies. And he said to himself, hey, I want to go start my own company. I think I can do that. The biggest failure with that, he probably doesn't know how to run a business, but he knows how to sell. So a good strategy for Tommy would be to bring a co-founder in around year 1.5, 1.5 to 2, who's got more CEO attributes. And that would be planning, strategy, policy, process, recruitment, all those things that Tommy's not good at. Because Tommy's great at sales. He's the best salesman on the planet, but he can't organize anything, right? So for him, putting this together is hard. That's why I said you need to vet it. Give it to the accountant, give it to the lawyer, give it to a friend who's a business owner who's been successful. Don't ever give it to anyone who doesn't know anything. Don't give it to your mum. She doesn't know, unless she's built a company. Don't give it to the friend you went to high school with, who's just got out of prison. Don't do that. It's not going to be smart. but give it to someone who can vet it well and be critical with it. That would be my advice. Okay, so just to do a bit of a roundup, break it down into iterations, make sure you vet all your information, make sure that you iterate it and break it down into smaller chunks so you can execute it well. Make those chunks small, not too big. You can't do everything all at once. You have to break each chunk or each iteration down into a strategy. The strategy forms an executive strategy, which is everything all in one document. That document should probably be about 10 pages. And then you have an execution strategy. When am I going to execute against each element or iteration in the strategy? And give yourself room to move around. So if you want to do it in February, don't leave it till the end of February. What'll happen is everything will start to fall over. This is very cyclical. That can't happen without that happening. So what happens is if you don't get that done now, this falls over. And then that falls over, and then that falls over, and then that number falls over. It just won't happen. So that's my advice. Hope that helped. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode.